My name's Roger Sahlquist. I'm a trustee of the university, and I think I'm the guy that suggested we have this event in the first place. So I got roped in to being here, not reluctantly, though. It's particularly exciting for me this morning because I wake up every morning with Anna Duckworth, and now I can look over and actually see her, you know. So this is a real exciting moment for me. On behalf of Father Steve Prevet, who's the president, our provost Jennifer Turpin, and the entire leadership of the best university, or the university of the best city in the world, the University of San Francisco. We're happy to have you here. I think this is particularly timely to have a symposium or an event like this because the role of professional broadcasters in journalism, to me, is just ever more important in a society that's increasingly addicted to instantaneous blogs, twits of partial and erroneous information. So it seems to me we require our professionals in this field to provide us with accurate information, with inspiration, and not least of all with entertainment. So you mix all those together and it's a challenging role, and we're happy to have such a distinguished group here today. The goals of today's event are to showcase women in broadcast journalism, highlighting a diverse group of media professionals who are successful in their chosen path, and to provide an opportunity for our students, especially those interested in media studies and journalism, the chance to hear directly from professionals that are doing well, and that doing well and good are not mutually exclusive. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, who is the real, I think, engine behind all this, Teresa Moore. It's all yours, boss.
Thank you, Roger. I just have to say, I mean, a lot of you all know me, and some of you know me from my former life as a reporter at the Chronicle. So my background is in print, and I have to say, even though I lecture, every other day practically, I'm kind of uncomfortable working with a microphone, and it tickles me that I'm up here with people who are very comfortable with this. So I hope I'm going to be able to hold up my end as the moderator. As Roger said, he was talking about waking up, to the sound of Anna Duckworth's voice. A lot of the women on this panel they've been around in the Bay Area for a long time, and in some cases they've been around nationally, and just getting the sense that you know them. These are people who become part of your everyday life, sort of part of your media family. But we have a little introductory video just so in case you're not familiar with them, and I know that might be the case for some students, so you can get a sense of what they're like on camera. So if you want to start the video, please. And this video was put together by Foster Johnson, a student in media studies.
And we're here with a line of people outside of St. Anthony's Foundation in San Francisco. Inside, the Christmas meal is being served. Santa Claus is here, coming up out of donations and volunteers to make it all happen for the holidays.
What do you think reports like the current report slide where they said that this country was moving to two separate societies. How does this affect
The whites are the ones who, I would say, make our movement move identified injustices in black people get taking the politicians who are going out of the White House, killing their leader, taking the athletes, champions, and putting them out with them, Russian, following and make people come to hear more about what it really is to shake up the house and restore body life. We don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't change white women, we now look at immigrants and age whites and they claim that after slaves, and we don't push white people out of the neighborhood, we're not pushing out of the restaurants, and yet we think that being on the side of the Negro who don't belong to the who don't belong to nothing, is watching one who looks right, and he sees Muslims getting under attention, and yet they're the cleanest and the nicest, they seem to look most of their life, and everything we practice, everything we preach, and the white folks will believe in what they're doing.
And now a conversation with Dr. Jarrett, White House Senior Advisor and Assistant to President Obama for Public Engagement and Intergovernmental Affairs. How is the President going to put the pieces of the puzzle together?
I'm glad you brought up education, because that's really the future.
Okay, so a few brief introductions, starting at this end. Valerie Coleman Morris began her broadcast career at KRON in 1969. She was a reporter for KRON and KGO throughout the mid-1980s. She anchored the news on KCBS Radio and worked at KCBS Television in Los Angeles. In the early 1990s, she moved to New York, where she was a reporter and anchor for WPIX. From there, she went to CNN, where she was business anchor for CNN Domestic and International. Back in the Bay Area, Morris, whose catchphrase is, "It's your money, so take it personally," continues to speak and write and report on personal finance. Morris is a journalism graduate of San Jose State University, where she was also the first Black homecoming queen. Thank you. Okay.
Along with Vic Lee, who was the vice president, who escorted me onto the field. We had diversity going on.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Very cool. Well, we have all sorts of college royalty here flanked on either. I'll get to that in a minute. But Jana Katsuyama is a reporter and fill-in anchor for KTVU Channel 2. She reported in Duluth, Minnesota and Dayton, Ohio before coming to the Bay Area. She was raised in Ohio and graduated with honors in English and a second major in East Asian Studies from Oberlin College. Jana is an award-winning journalist with Ohio Associated Press Awards for Best Broadcast Writing and Best Enterprise Reporting, an award from the Society of Professional Journalists, as well as several Emmy Award nominations. She's also a member of the Asian American Journalism Association. Belva Davis, and this could go on for a really long time. Get that book. Okay. Belva Davis began her broadcasting career in 1956 as the first Black woman hired by KSAN Radio. She started out reading newspaper clips on the air, moved on to hosting a live radio program for which she sometimes cooked lunches for the audience. And I don't mean like a cooking demonstration, I mean making meals that were served at the live broadcast. She became the first Black woman television journalist in the West in 1966, when she became a reporter for KPIX. From 1981 to 1999, she was a reporter for KRON. She is the host of This Week in Northern California, which is aired on KQED radio and television. She has 6 regional Emmy Awards, and in 1996, she was honored with a Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Academy of Arts and Sciences. She's the author of Never in My Wildest Dreams, A Black Woman's Life in Journalism. And if you, I kind of feel like I'm having a Larry King moment here. If you really want to understand Bay Area history and journalism history, you should get this book. And it really does read like a novel. I mean, there's all sorts of like sociological and journalism and media and political history in the book, but it's also one woman's story. So trust me, it's a good read and you'll learn a lot of stuff, okay? Anna Duckworth, a native of Milpitas and a graduate of the San Jose State University Journalism Program, began her career in 1994 at KCBS Radio. And after several years as a television reporter for KRON and KPIX, Anna is back at KCBS Radio. Vicki Nguyen's family came to the Bay Area from Vietnam when she was 2. A University of San Francisco alumnus of the class of 2000, Vicki was valedictorian and class president. She was a reporter at stations in Florida, Arizona, and Nevada before coming home to work at NBC Bay Area. An Emmy Award-winning reporter, Vicki is part of NBC Bay Area's investigative team. She has earned several journalism awards from the Asian American Journalists Association and the Radio and Television News Directors Association. Vicki has also taught video reporting for the USF journalism minor. So these are our panelists, and we are looking forward to a very exciting afternoon. I want to start with Belva because she just returned from the RNC convention in Tampa, and her book opens with her attending her first RNC convention in 1964 here in San Francisco at the Cow Palace. And just to sort of give you a sense of the tenor of what happened in 1964, the title of the chapter, this is the first chapter of the book, is, quote, "What the hell are you niggers doing in here?" End quote. Okay, so for those of you who, think of the Bay Area as this bastion of harmony and diversity, it wasn't always thus. Belva, how are things, do you want to start by talking about what it was like then and move to now, or do you want to go from now to back?
Well, I think the difference is back then I expected sort of what happened because that's where we were. The Civil Rights Act had just been signed in July, and so we just legally had our rights. And here we were pushing to get into their convention where the Dixiecrats were born and where you sort of expected the worst because the country was going through this change and people were feeling disenfranchised and they were trying to take back America then just as they are now. So my story was to, as the sort of the swan song of my career, to go to the convention this year and to see how it was treated. Well, those of you who kept up with the small news coming out of that convention probably heard the story. I was on the floor when a black news camera woman from CNN was shooting and walking across the aisle. And these guys, and that's the way it was with us when we were being told, like, get out of here, why are you here? They started taunting her, and finally they threw peanuts at her and said, that's how we feed animals down here. And that was just weeks ago. And I was explaining to Teresa my experience, not as bad as being driven from the hall, but I was trying to do a news stand-up on the floor. And at first, somebody came over and said, well, you can't have a tripod on the floor. We said, okay, understandable. So we put it away. So then we started again, and we got a mic, and I started to talk. And they said, you can't have wires on the floor. So I picked up all the wires. I put them in the back of my skirt, as women tend to do. And then they said, no, you just can't have wires on the floor. So then the camera person walked back, and he got a cordless mic, and we started again. And they said, you can't have a transmitting microphones on the floor either. Well, somebody, I guess, higher up had been watching this, and I don't know this guy. He was in a baseball jacket, and he came over, and he had a little yellow sticker, and he put the little yellow sticker on our camera, and he says, maybe they'll leave you alone long enough for you to get this done. Hurry it up. So there I was, with almost 50 years between these experiences, and but it nowhere came next to throwing food and bottles and things at me. Growth, right? So that was then, and you.
Now, Valerie, you were coming out of school with a journalism degree at San Jose State, really just, not that long after Belva went on the air. What did you imagine your career was going to be like coming out in the late 60s?
I imagined that my career in the late 60s, I graduated in 68. I went to Columbia University for my master's degree. I received a New York Times fellowship for 1 year, so I did a 1-year master's because that's how much money I had. My major professor was Fred Friendly, who was the person who created the Edward R. Murrow persona. He told us that we needed, as people of color, and there were probably about 10 in my class, that we needed to act like we knew what we were doing because we were well trained, and we did. And so we went out with that attitude. Now, did that stop the fact that other people who chose to be who either were ignorant, chose to act ignorant, would do the sort of things that Belva has just told you happened as recently as a couple of years ago. Yes, it happened then frequently, and yes, it can still happen depending on your circumstance and depending on the story.
Now, Belva, you really, I mean, the book sort of talks about all these little tiny steps that you were taking to this career. When you say never in my wildest dreams, when you think about the modest beginnings, it's pretty incredible. What was it like for you being the first in so many situations? I don't think, I mean, a lot of our students are aware of how hard it is to get a job on air and a job in any market, let alone a major market. But can you give a sense of the kinds of things that you had to do and the kinds of chances you had to take to get on the air and to stay on the air for so long?
Well, you know, you can be sort of easy on yourself if you're the first. You don't have an example in front of you, so you're not failing at anything. What you hope you're doing is not setting an example that's going to make it more difficult for the next person coming after you. My most difficult time was with the technicians that had to work with me. Because, you know, in many states, romance or any relationship between blacks and whites was frowned upon. So the news cameramen, when they would go out with me, we would become an interracial couple. And, well, it's true. We'd walk down the street, we'd be an interracial couple. So several of them had, you know, these things that they would do. I'm sorry I forgot my mic, or did you have to go back to get something or other else, and here's a key, and you go on. Well, you know, I just went along as though I didn't have any idea what they were doing, why they were having me. And then there were other guys who just didn't want to go out with me. They would say because I was short. And, and therefore I couldn't defend them. Well, I got a chance to prove that wrong, really got a chance to prove that wrong. But those were the kinds of things. But the one thing I knew, I couldn't be a complainer. That was for sure. And that is one thing you learn as you grow up brown, is that you try to, if you really want to end up with some dignity, you try to solve your own problems and not to go back and expect someone else to enforce some rules on your behalf, because that's the way you become an outsider. Mm-hmm. And I'd say that is true today. If you have certainly personnel problems, you try to solve them on your own, because you want to remain part of whatever group, because you got to work with these people every day.
Now, back over the summer, I sent a few questions out to the panelists, and one of the things that I asked them was, you know, like, what's one of the things that you're proudest of? And Anna, your answer really, it really struck me. And you said, probably the most inspiring thing I feel I've done as a journalist is to not underestimate myself. I was told early on and throughout my career by influential people that I'd never make it in this business, or that I should aim lower, but I didn't give up. I just kept showing up ready to work. Why did people tell you that? I mean, you know, we know you as this amazing person that we've seen on TV and heard on the radio. What were they thinking?
Well, I'll give you one example that comes to mind, and this was my first journalism professor at San Jose State University. I had, you know, gone to the class the first half of the semester. I failed every single assignment. And we would listen to KCBS at the top of the hour. We would have to write our own stories, and I kept getting Fs, and he required that we come in mid-semester to his office to have a sit-down meeting. And when I sat down in his office, I think I was 21 years old, he told me that he hoped that I could find a good husband and that I knew how to cook, because I would never make it in broadcasting. And, you know, my response was to break down in tears right in front of him. I couldn't help it. And I cried quite a bit, but, you know, the next day I went to class and...
Wait, Anna, what year was this that he was saying this to you?
Oh, my goodness, this must have been 1996 or 1997. So, you know, I discussed it with some of my classmates and learned that this might have been kind of a tactic that he used to kind of push you and, you know, make you work hard to believe in yourself. That's what I think I'm choosing to believe now. At the time, I was devastated, but I just didn't let it stop me from continuing on with this dream that I had to be in broadcasting. And, you know, when I got into broadcasting at Channel 4, I really wanted to go on the air. I was a writer and doing traffic reporting. And one of the news directors, I grew up in the Bay Area. This is my home. I've never wanted to leave in terms of relocating. And a lot of people do that, and that's fine. But I really wanted to work my way up at Channel 4. And he told me that I would be a good middle market broadcaster, and that I should probably think about going to a middle market somewhere else in the country. And, that was what he said. I don't know what the motivation was. Maybe it was good advice or not, but I just didn't let that deter me from continuing to work here in the Bay Area, because I love it here. I love the people here. There's so much going on, and I've really enjoyed it. And those are the little scars that you get. You get scars along the way, but they heal up, and you keep moving.
Am I right in thinking that you are unusual in having had pretty much your whole career in the Bay Area?
That's what I understand. My situation is not unique for me because it's been my situation, but yes, a lot of people have moved out of the Bay Area, but, I'm an example that you don't have to. It has worked out.
I see Vicki shaking her head, yes. So, Vicki, where have you been, and what brought you back here?
I have been all over the place. So I started, after I graduated from USF, I started in Orlando, Florida, where I was a one-man band. So that means I shot all my video, edited it, wrote my stories, drove myself around. It's a miracle I never crashed my car, because back then we had like the flip phone, the map book, and there was no Siri to call upon. And after I worked in Orlando, I came back to Reno and worked for the ABC affiliate there, and I had a photographer, so that was very exciting for me. Then I went to Phoenix, where I spent 3 years at the Fox station, and then I came home, which is the Bay Area for me. So I admire Anna for being able to be so persistent and for getting her start here. I would say that I agree with her that it is not that easy, especially when you come from a metropolitan place like a New York or an LA or the Bay Area. It's tough, and you have to be willing to move around the country to get your start in journalism. And actually, I think that it really informs who you become as a journalist as well, because you get to see how different people live. You're very spoiled living here and being from here. The diversity here, from the people to the attitudes to the culture to the food, it's unmatched. So it's good to get out there and see how other people see the world, because when you are telling stories and meeting different people and trying to inform your audience, you bring that perspective with you. So it's not always a bad thing. It is tough to live in Wausau, Wisconsin, or Odessa, Texas, or places you'd never heard of, but it will pay off eventually.
Now, Jenna, you started in Duluth, Minnesota. I don't know much about Minnesota other than what I've heard on A Prairie Home Companion, but
it was like A Prairie Home Companion. I walked into my first station, and they were introducing people, and they said, well, this is Dave Jensen and Mark Olson and Stevenson, and it was just like walking into that. But I'm originally from the Midwest, and so my father is from San Francisco. I grew up in Ohio, and to me, coming to visit relatives in California was a very different experience. I remember the first time, and I'm like, there are so many people with dark hair. And it was just odd to me, because in the Midwest, in Ohio, it tends to be, when you talk about diversity, it's black and white. And if you're Asian, a lot of times people look at you as, a recent immigrant. And my family has been here, since the early 1900s. And so that was kind of what I grew up in. And, I think some of my cousins here in the Bay Area and down in Southern California had this image of the Midwest and of Ohio as being, very bigoted and a lot of, and lacking diversity. But at the same time, you start to see other ways that this country is put together, that there is diversity among people who are white and black and Asian. And, so you have Germans and, Irish and Italians and all this other mix in Ohio. And that was what I grew up in. Duluth was another kind of strange experience for me, in that going there, the largest minority group was Native American. And there's a very strong Native American culture up there. And that was new to me, even as a Midwesterner, to be in the upper Midwest and see that. And it was great. And I think, again, like Vicki said, I applaud Anna for staying in this area, because, for me, my dream was to come back to San Francisco and to report here. But at the same time, I think you really have to examine yourself and see what your own experience is and what would push you. And to me, sometimes leaving an area like this or leaving a large city and going into these small communities across the country, you get an incredible insight into what this country is about and the regional differences that sometimes get passed over, when we look at, the larger entertainment media and other things. And just as a note, one thing also is I never studied journalism or communications in college. It was never my dream to be a journalist. I was working overseas in Japan after I graduated on a government program teaching English there. And I really thought that, my goal was going to be doing international business or international law. And I had this opportunity out of the blue, an offer from NHK, which is like the BBC of Japan. A friend of mine worked there, and they had asked me to come and do a camera test. And after one day in this headquarters in Tokyo, they offered me the job, and I was in there, and I was looking at all of these screens and thinking, wow, this is what I think I really would love to do. Long story short, I ended up not being able to take that job because of some contract conflicts. But what I would say to all of you is I kind of reached this crossroads where I thought, you know what, this is kind of the path that I had thought I wanted to do and that I had, that seemed safe. And then this is this other path that has just opened up to me, which I felt on a very visceral level. Like, I thought, this is something that I could get paid to, every day, ask questions and talk to people and find out what's going on in the world. And yet it also meant kind of dropping off a cliff and just saying, hey, I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to, start at the very bottom and work my way up, going to below minimum wage to, because when you start off in this business, oftentimes it isn't glamorous, it is not well paying, but you have to do it because you have a love for it. And so I just encourage all of you, as you are at this wonderful, moment, to really think about what your heart is saying and what you feel like you really love doing. And it might not be the safest thing, but if you really have that passion, then I fully believe that, that will take you a lot farther than going into something because it seems safe or because it's a good paycheck. Because at the end of the day, you want to be able to say, hey, I did what I really wanted to do.
Valerie?
I'd like to add something because I'm kind of a hybrid of the people on this table. I'm an Air Force kid. I was born in Philadelphia, left 6 weeks later, quite precocious, as my mother would always say whenever we gave that time frame. And I lived in England, France, Scotland, and Japan by the time I was a junior in high school. If you're a military kid, you either love it or you hate it, and I absolutely loved it. My parents did a masterful job of saying to me when I was 6 years old, you are getting ready to go on a great adventure. And of course, that got my attention. And then they said, and you get to go live in a country where there is a princess who is about to be a queen. Well, I have a 6-year-old, my granddaughter is 6 years old today. And the princess thing is huge. So my parents actually negotiated the right frame of mind for me and put me in the right frame of mind to receive it, one. Second thing, they made me a global citizen before it was popular, before it was known. And so, and Anna, I was at KCBS, glad I have a chance to say hello to you. I love the fact that you are here and that you worked through that way. And I think that you need to see that there are those options. The other options, for me, I had always traveled, and so people thought, well, I was just going to stay here forever. And I did. I was here from 1969 until I went to CNN, which was about 16 years ago. But I have always felt that if you are born on the West Coast, go east. If you were born on the East Coast, go west. If you were born in the middle of the country, go somewhere that enlarges. Anyway. I didn't mean that as a pejorative. That came out wrong. There you go. What I was saying was, from the mid part of the country, your choice can be to go to many places. The opportunity is what you need. And diversity, as I was saying to Mary earlier, diversity to me is the 21st century commodity. And whatever your diverseness is, wear it, show it, use it. Make sure that the skills that you bring are that unique. Don't think of being a person of color. I don't think that I'm different negative. I am different unique. I'm African American and Native American. My mother's family is Pima Indian. Look at the opportunity that gives me to say to a potential employer, here are all of the additional things that I can bring to you. Those are assets. Know your assets, know your liabilities, know yourself.
Valerie, I want to ask you something about CNN, because my sense of CNN, and maybe this is because of Bernard Shaw, but I have the sense that CNN was a more diverse place to work because of who they were putting on the air. And maybe because it started in my lifetime. Was it different from what you experienced the other places you worked?
CNN was very different because it was, number one, it was the first. You know, the 21st, the very first that said, yeah, news 24 hours. It was the first that said, you know what, the news at noon, 5, 6, and 11 is fine, but what if I want it at a different time? It was the first that said there are stories that deserve more than a minute and a half and then it's gone. And so, yes, we'll stick with it. So there were many opportunities that CNN bought, and obviously, if you have a good idea, you know it when it's replicated. So now everybody has of that. Much like CNN was, the first looking at financial news as an independent part of the station, not just a story here and there, because the Dow is up or the Dow is down, but what does it mean? How does it impact your life? So I also viewed CNN differently. It was a different part of my career. I mean, I've been in television news for 40 plus years. I mean, I've right? Belva, help me. You led the way. It was an opportunity for me to say at different parts of your career, you can tend to look at situations differently because you have a different need. So when I was starting as a student, it was, I need to get in, I need to prove myself, I need to do these things. About 15 years into my career is when I said, you know what, I really think the value of radio is exceptional. And that's when I went to KCBS Radio. And people said, you never leave television and go to radio. You go from radio to television, just like people would say, you could leave newspapers to go to television, but you wouldn't do the reverse, those presumptions. I went to radio, and KCBS made me such a better reporter. Because when you have to turn that story top every 7 minutes or so, that tends to get your attention, that tends to get your juices flowing, and all of that. So CNN was a trendsetter. But for me, CNN also was received in a more open and opportunistic way on my part. I had not done financial news. I learned on the air in front of 290 million people. And that's the reason why when I talk about money, I can look at people and go, hold on, it's not that hard. You are smart enough. Yes, you can do it. Just back up, regroup, go forward. Because if we don't have that kind of opportunity, then people won't grow. I needed to grow at CNN and did it successfully for 15 years. And now I'm home.
Can I get an idea of who is in our audience in terms of seniors? Raise your hands. Okay, so you guys are like, we need to know what we're doing next. Juniors? Sophomores? Freshmen? Okay, and who's a journalism major or interested in broadcast journalism or any form of journalism? Okay, great, thank you. That just helps us figure out, helps me figure out which areas I should ramble on about.
Something that I'm going to ask you guys to talk about, when I initially sent out some questions to the panelists, I sent an extra question to Vicki because I know her. And I said to Vicki, so the thing that I'm really curious about is how is it that you have 2 little kids and you are always on TV? And we had a little back and forth about that, but then I got Valerie's answers back. And Valerie mentioned, I hadn't asked her about being a mother or anything, and she mentioned being the first person to be pregnant on television as a reporter. So I think, Jenna, do you have children? Yes. Okay. So we have 5 mothers here who also are all on TV. How did you make that happen? And a lot of you, when you're talking about that guy said, you better find yourself a good husband, a lot of you have talked about how your husbands really made it possible for you to have the kinds of careers that you have. So if you could talk, because I know that maybe for some of you it's too soon for you to be thinking about how am I going to have a career and have a family, but we have a wealth of experience up here for women who've made that happen. And Vicki, you in particular pointed out that you need to make a choice to have a family and a career. How do you make that work?
I think, I recently read a memoir by Mika Brzezinski. She's on Morning Joe on MSNBC. And I thought it was really refreshing what she was saying in her book, because it's something I tell my interns all the time. And by the way, it's amazing, this panel, the folks that are up here and hearing their breadth of experience, you would not get a collection of women like this anywhere. So I'm in awe. But for me, as a fairly recent graduate, I will say, you as a woman especially, if having a family is something that is important to you, or you think it will be down the line, you're 19, 20, 21 now, 30 is like right around the corner. And then in this business in particular, you hit that milestone quicker than you imagine, because it's really exciting what you're doing. You're going full force, and then all of a sudden you realize, like, along the way, have I been doing what I should be doing for my personal life the same way I've been hard charging after my professional life? And sometimes, especially for us women, that biological clock is ticking and it doesn't stop. So put as much gusto in finding your teammate, your partner, whoever that person is going to be, because I think television, in some ways, you're on borrowed time. And, at some point, you're going to look back, and the things that you're going to be proud of in your career are important, but the things that you've accomplished in your personal life and the people that surround you are also important. And TV can be really ruthless too. You have a lot of ups and downs, and sometimes that's not based on your performance, it's based on how your manager is feeling that day, or if someone in a higher position is not having a good day. So you really should prioritize having a family if that is important to you, the same exact way you would go after it. And it's hard, and it's a juggling act, but that's also what keeps you sane. One of my former mentees called the other day. She's at a career transition. She's got an interview in Sacramento. She's also got an interview in Los Angeles, different job positions. And then at the end of the conversation, she said, on a side note, how do you deal with jealousy? Just straight out. You're on Facebook, you're on Twitter, so-and-so's doing this awesome story, so-and-so just got a promotion to anchor at this station, and here you are, in your market, doing what you're trying to do, getting to that next job, and their Facebook reality is amazing, right? This is a very competitive business. You're always going to be kind of envious or jealous. That's normal. That's people, right? And don't forget, like, the grass is always greener on Facebook. But I told her, you know what? You got to be the best you. There's always going to be someone smarter or prettier or younger or whatever, but there's no one that's going to be better at being you than you. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but it's true. So focus on the things you can work on and change and improve upon and grow. And you'll have that confidence. And also have some balance. Have people that tell you that, your life isn't all about that story that you just did that day. You go home to, your friends, your family, the people you love, and they help you keep a healthy perspective too, so that this doesn't sort of eat you alive.
Now, Anna, you have 3 children.
Mm-hmm.
How old are they?
My oldest just turned 8 last week, and I have twins that are 6.
Oh, wow. Okay, so how do you manage having little kids and having your career?
Most of the time I feel not very well. But in all seriousness, I always feel like something is being not done up to the best I can do. But like Vicki said, you just do the best you can do, and that has to be good enough at the end of the day. I actually made the choice to leave TV because of my family. And that was just the situation that I was in. Everybody's situation is different, but I made the decision that it was taking up too much time away from my children. I was working a morning shift at Channel 5, so I would get up at 2:30 in the morning, and by the time I got home, I would get home by 1 in the afternoon, but I would be so tired that I really couldn't devote the time and energy and attention to my kids that I wanted to. So after some soul searching, I decided it was time for me to leave Channel 5. And I didn't know what I was going to do after that. I just knew that I needed to spend some more time with my family. Thankfully, the opportunity at KCBS opened up a few months later, and I just feel like it's a better balance for me. And being in TV at the time was wonderful for me. It taught me so much about making my deadlines, about writing, about getting the right information for the story. And now I basically do the same thing that I did on TV, on radio, but I don't have to check my hair every 5 minutes, so it's great. But no, that feeling of not devoting enough time to my family ate away at me to the point where I had to make a change, and I did, and I'm thankful that it has turned out well. But it was up to me to make that choice, because I've seen a lot of people burn out in TV, or in broadcasting in general, because it is a very competitive business. But, if you take care of your own well-being first, I think the rest tends to follow.
Valerie, what was it like being a pregnant pioneer on television? Did they hide you, or were there discussions about how long you could stay on the air?
I didn't tell anyone or at the station that I was pregnant until I was 5 months pregnant. I was wearing big wide belts. I could not afterwards hide it because that was when KGO had us all walking onto the set. So we weren't here and then the open. It was, you walked from there onto the set. I just held my head high, my stomach forward, and walked. It's funny, I laugh about it only because when I think about what I went through to conceal it, it was like, that was crazy. Why was that the case? It was the case because it was politics of the television newsroom, and politics play in our lives all the time. Hugely for women, because the presumption was, okay, if you're going to have a baby, then what's going to happen? And so we all work harder to make sure that, there's no blip or dip in our productivity. My mother helped me with two things. Number one, she said, Valerie, drop the word balance. When is the last time you had a 50-50 day? 50% family, 50% work. It just doesn't happen. And yet women, and especially in my day, that was when we got the supermom title, doing it all, everybody was trying to balance. And my mother said, just integrate your life. I remember she did, just integrate your life. Which means sometimes it's going to be 80-20 and whatever. But if you can embrace that now at this point, you won't make yourself crazy when you reach decisions on other things with your career and your personal life. So you need to integrate them. The most difficult thing about being pregnant on air was everybody else's nervousness. My crew, every time I'd come and sit down, they would look at me. You could just tell. And in fact, one of my floor directors always would do right before we started, he'd do like this, and he'd go, just dipping my hands in the hot water if I have to do a delivery. And it was very tender. It wasn't a negative at all. But it was just there was nobody that they had worked with. Everybody took a maternity leave. You disappeared and then you came back. So that's how I handled it. I wasn't looking at balance. I was looking at integrating my life. I knew that because I was pregnant, it didn't mean that my brain wasn't still functioning, so I didn't act like many people thought that we would all of a sudden, have these, pardon the pun, pregnant pauses, of not being able to produce. And the final thing I'd like to say is that when I did come back to work, and I came back to work 3 months after my first daughter was born, I have 2 daughters, and it was the oh my goodness, time. It was the governor's race, Jerry Brown, and he was running against. I am so sorry, my mind will capture it in a moment. But the point is that I was sent down to do a story in Southern California. Here I had, my daughter who was still very young. I called my parents, they lived in Riverside. We were gonna be starting the tour actually in LA. So I took my daughter, flew home, left her with my parents. They were delighted, went and did the 5 days, and came back and finished it in Riverside, where Belva used to cater, but my mom and dad prepared meals for my crew. Those are the memories that I have about being pregnant on television. I was healthy. I took care of myself. I looked well. I didn't look really pregnant, except if you saw me standing up and waddling onto the set of KGO.
This question is for everybody on the panel, and I feel strange asking it, but I think it's germane. How much have looks mattered in your careers?
How much?
How much have looks mattered? Like what you look like?
Could I say something just to tag on to what they're talking about? Because when I started, the women's movement was just getting underway, and I had 2 children, and my youngest was not yet in school. And I only say this because there's so many guys out there, to let you know it wasn't just me, it was my husband who was the leader. My husband quit his job and stayed home. Luckily for us, he was a photographer, opened up a little lab in our garage, and he took care of our children. And it was his decision because he felt that the pressure on me was going to be so enormous that he didn't want me to worry about the children along the way. But my guilt overrode a lot of that. Oftentimes when I got off late, because there was no 8-hour workday back then, you just worked for a set salary. And if you read in here, I had a part in creating an 8-hour workday. But I would wake my children up and have them have dinner with us because I saw that on television, that families, ate together. And I didn't want to deny them that privilege, even though I don't think that they can remember one meal. But I just wanted to say that because Bill was such a unique guy, and all of you have an opportunity to be a unique guy also.
Just to add to that point, and I think that's really sweet, and I think, what you're hearing too is that, the spouses, when you're in broadcasting, it is such a demanding job. I mean, I think we've all given up holidays, had to say, we can't make Thanksgiving dinner because we have to work. It's very strange that way. It's almost like doctor's hours. You never know if a big story is going to happen, and you're going to get called at 2 in.the morning to go out and cover it. And so, I think just as Belva was saying, the person that you pick as your partner is really important. For me, I have a 5-month-old son. I just had a baby in March. And one of those moments, I always thought, okay, it's fine. Channel 2 is great, KTVU. We have like 12, we call it the Channel 2 baby boom. There are like 12 babies for Channel 2 employees that are going to be born in this next year. And so the management is really, really sensitive to, the issues of parenting and work. But the thing that really, one incident that really brought it home to me was last October when there were the Occupy protests. And, as a journalist and as a professional, you want to be on the big story. You want to be, covering it and in the middle of it. So I was in Oakland covering the Occupy protests and, was going to be the lead for our 10 o'clock news. And just 30 seconds before I went on air, I heard this pop, 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 and I look around and there are these people running towards me with this big cloud of tear gas right behind. Well, I was 4 months pregnant, and the first thing that came to my mind is, I have to get out of here. Like this is not going to be good for me. It's not going to be good for my baby. I have to go. So I took off running. And the anchors they couldn't see what was going on. And so they went ahead and tossed to me and they said, Jana Katsuyama is live in Oakland in the middle of everything. And the camera comes up and my photographer, Ben Cruz, held his ground and there's no Jana Katsuyama because she's halfway down the block. So I was, running to try and get away from this. But since the anchor had tossed to me, your instinct kicks in. And so the first instinct is, well, talk. So here I am, and I'm like, well, they just ran out of tear gas, and it was just bizarre. And, and so I'm running around, I'm trying to get away from it, and I finally toss back to them, and they go to my pre-recorded story. And so after that, I actually ended up getting shelter inside of a Channel 5, van because there was somebody in there and I'm pounding on the door and they let me in. And, tear gas, that was the first time that I'd ever been in tear gas. I would never wish it on anyone. It is a horrible feeling, a horrible experience. I mean, your eyes are burning and everything's running and you can't see, you can't talk. And, and after that, I had a really long heart-to-heart conversation with my husband, and I had, my managers actually called me in, and they said, you know what, we love your reporting, you're doing great, but we also want to make sure that you're safe. And so there is this conflict that you come into when, there is that personal and then there's the professional. And so, for me, it was the reconciliation that I am still worthy, I'm still a good journalist, I'm still, valuable to the team, even if for this amount of time, I may not be able to go out and be in the middle of, rallies with tear gas. And so, in that sense, you are negotiating the personal and the professional all the time. And I think for women, because of pregnancy, because of family, that often comes, at very difficult times. And you just have to allow yourself to say, hey, I know my own self-worth. I know my own worth. And, hopefully you're in a place, as I feel I am, where there are people who value that.
To return to the question asked a little while ago, I know that I don't know if it's still the case, but I know historically it's been an issue more for women than for men, but probably for men too on television, what they look like. And I know that, like, when you're talking about television being ruthless, I'm thinking about people who, sort of got shoved off the air as they started to look older, or maybe they had pressure to look a certain way. There's an article in this month's Atlantic magazine talking about how women on cable television are appearing more and more sort of painted. and guests coming on are, it's one thing if you're an anchor, but this machine, I'm regularly a guest, and she's like, I'm amazed at like how many different kinds of eyeshadow they put on me. But anyway, I mean, Belva, you've been in the business for a very long time, and has that ever been an issue for you?
Of course.
Okay, how?
Well, this sort of comes with the first stuff, because they don't have any experience with it.
Okay.
My first confrontation with it was when they brought in, we were launching a newscast, and they brought in this top makeup artist from Los Angeles to do everybody's personal makeup. The Westmoreland brothers, they were quite famous. And so, yeah. And so when they got to me, they just looked at me and they said, "You're fine."
Translation, Velvet.
Yeah, and so I found out that the only thing they had was this makeup they'd done for Elizabeth Taylor for Cleopatra. And it just wasn't going to work on me. So they just did nothing. And because it was better for me to let that moment pass and to work out another solution, I let it pass. Then became the problem of the hair, what to do with the hair. And finally, I had to make peace with that because we had a big ruckus here over Dorothy Reed's hair.
Tell them about Dorothy Reed's hair, because I don't think
Dorothy Reed was going to the opening of the ballet, and she had cornrows in her hair. And she wanted to wear them on air the next day. They said no. And she was subsequently suspended, fired, because of her hairstyle. And the union had to go to bat for her wholly, providing a lawyer and everything else. And so that was a big test. And so my solution, for some of you will think it was the chicken way out, but I said, as long as I pay to get my hair done, I'll wear it the way I want. You want to pay for having my hair done, then you can have a say. So they decided to pay to have my hair done.
Wow.
That was not a good solution for some people, but it was the way I could be pleased with that.
If you can get them to pay for your hair and your makeup in this day and age, more power to you. But we don't have makeup artists, I mean, at my station in terms of, even for the anchors, you're kind of on your own. And do looks matter? Absolutely. I mean, television is a visual medium, right? Are looks the only thing you should worry about? No. You should come to work dressed and appearing the way that you want for the job that you want. So if you want to be an intern forever, wear the flip-flops and the jeans and the tank top. If you want to actually become a producer or a reporter or whatever else, dress the way those people dress in the newsroom. It's crazy to hear that someone was fired over cornrows. But the truth is, unless you're Oprah, you need to kind of look the part of the people that are in your arena. And that doesn't just apply to journalism. If you go into business, if you go and work for a startup, then the flip-flops are good. And if you show up in a suit, you are going to be mocked. So whatever the profession is that you go into, you do need to kind of see how people are presenting themselves and see how that works for you. But yeah, looks matter. It's important. I mean, struggle with the hair then, I struggle with the hair now. And if I look back at the 12 years of just hair and makeup, it's a crazy odyssey. So yeah, it's something you think about. It's funny to hear Anna say, you do the same thing in radio. It's more challenging, I think, because the turnaround time is more frequent for your stories. But thank goodness you don't have to powder your nose and check your hair one more time before, you get broadcast. But it is important, and your presentation matters, I think, in any industry, and yes, when you're on air, for sure.
Well, and I want to say, so, the TV stations hire consultants that come in and work with you on your look. And when I first started at Channel 4, it was a very overwhelming time. I had done traffic reporting on the radio and went in for a week-long audition to see if I would do the afternoon traffic reports, and they hired me after the third day. So it was very overwhelming. I'd never been on TV before, and all of a sudden it's going to be my job. And they had this very nice lady, her name was Judy Grant, and she was not only a voice coach, but also just kind of a career coach. And she pulls me aside and she tells me that I need to get a more cohesive look. And I struggled with that. I said, what does that mean? She said, you just need to look more cohesive. And my hair was pretty wild at the time. I think I used a smaller barrel curling iron, and it was kind of frizzy on the, it's frizzy. So I have frizzy hair. But I got after that, they wanted it more sleek, they wanted it more put together. And I did the best I could. But it was something that you know, I had to deal with it. It wasn't something that I made a priority in my life up to that point. But yeah, I knew that to do the job, if they told me I needed to look more cohesive, I needed to find out, first of all, what that meant, and then just do my best to implement it. And it seemed to work out. But, you know, they're looking very closely at the way you look, so it absolutely plays a role, even if it doesn't come in as a factor in the stories that you're covering.
I'm the old person here, so I can say this. It really irks me to see a newswoman in the morning with green eyeshadow. I just think about all of the trouble, all of the work people did so that we could look natural. And then, when I went down to LA, somebody will probably know this, girls are sitting on high bar stools so that the length of their skirt shows, and they twirl, you know, and I'm thinking, I think you guys got mixed up here somewhere. You're selling yourself instead of the news.
I'm going to ask one last question, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. Last night, I heard the term predator. Do you know what the predator is? Okay, tell them what predators are.
Producer, editor,
Writer.
writer. Okay, yeah.
Okay. So, and you talked about the one-man band. I know that a lot of all types of newsrooms have had shrinking budgets and shrinking staffs, and you're being asked to do more of the job. How have these changes affected the type of career that you all who are still on, you know, in it are having, and what should people be who are interested in going into television journalism be thinking about in terms of their futures? How they should be preparing this? This is open to anybody who wants to speak on this.
Go ahead, Jane.
So I think one of the things about, you know, there's the great thing about technology is that you get things quickly. And then the downside of it is that you're getting a lot of things quickly. And so I think, you know, it's been a great tool for me, and I know a lot of, you know, people in news, because if you want to verify something, you know, the internet, having a smartphone there, you know, you can get all kinds of information instantly. But I think one of the things that I keep coming back to is, you know, in my experience in a liberal arts education, and I think whatever it is that you're doing, is the ability to think critically. Because in this day and age, you're getting so much information so quickly. And it's that ability to look at something and to question, and then to think, what are the things that I need to, how can I examine this? How can I establish whether it's true or not? And those are the kinds of skills, the ability to read, to think, and to ask really important questions, I think are the basic tools that you need. The other technical tools are things that you can use to get the information, but basically what's going on inside your brain is the most important processing that's going on. It doesn't matter how much processing power you have in your hand, it's what you have in your head, and how you're able to tease through things and make sure that when you're reporting on something, or if you're a news consumer, are you asking the questions of, well, how did they arrive at that assumption? Where are they getting those numbers? What's the basis for this tweet? And those are the things I think that every day as you're going through your classes, and you know, you're being confronted with news articles, with reports, with studies, you know, with masses of documents from, you know, the state as you're doing research. Those are the kinds of things that you should really be focusing on. I mean, you know, the looks and the technical parts of how to put together, you know, reports are important, but really it's about the approach that you take to the information, because there's more and more of it out there.
Do I think you should know how to shoot and edit your own video and tell a story? Yes, I think that would be an extremely valuable skill for you to get, whether you get it here in your classes or if you get it through an internship. And that would be kind of the takeaway for what I think would be good for you is do your homework. I mean, if it is broadcast journalism or radio or television or internet, at the end of the day, multimedia journalist is the word that I hear a lot, and that means you're going to do it all. So just because you start out in print doesn't mean you're not going to be asked to record a video that then you post online yourself. And your writing style for print or broadcast or web, those are all different as well. So it's hard to be a jack of all trades and a master of none, but I think some of you have just grown up with the tools that some of us are learning, on the job. So it's going to be second nature to you. So don't get overwhelmed by that aspect. But try to learn every time you have an opportunity to learn how to shoot something or edit something or write a web article and how that's different from writing a print article, or how to conduct an interview that's going to be, for radio versus television. Those are all things that you should start collecting and putting in your toolbox now, because by the time you graduate in 1, 2, or 3 years, the landscape of multimedia journalism will be different again. So being able to adapt and also kind of doing that cross-training now is going to really prepare you well for it. Does it mean that in the future everyone's going to be a backpack journalist and doing everything by themselves? No, I think there's a time and place for, an electronic news gathering crew, a cameraman, a reporter, a sound person. I was at a panel recently talking to people who are on air and behind the scenes for 2020 and for Nightline and Dateline and things like that. And you've probably noticed this. The video is very different. If you're doing an interview with Beyonce, yeah, you're going to have a huge bank of lights. If you are traveling to Antarctica to document someone's trip to wherever in an igloo, you may be with a producer, or that person may just be shooting video on a GoPro or their own iPhone. So that's not taboo anymore. The video that you see on mainstream network television sometimes does come from a home camera that's embedded in a family, and they're asked to record their child every morning. So things are changing so much, and I think the best education you can get, in addition to your education at USF, is to get into the newsroom or the office or the startup company, wherever you think that you want to be. Get in there and see how they're doing things right now in real time, and then figure out if that's what you're going to want to do. Because as we've talked about, the pay in journalism is not the greatest. I mean, I'll speak from my personal experience. My first job offer was in Sioux City, Iowa, and I think I remember the offer was for $18,500 a year, a whole year. And I mean, I could have gone to the McDonald's there, and gotten an hourly job and made more money than I would have doing, the job of a one-man band for the ABC station in Sioux City, Iowa. And that was 2000. That hasn't changed. I have interns as recently as last year asking me if they should take a job for $19,700. So that scale has really not moved a whole lot. So you're going to be in this for more than just the money. And eventually the money will come, or at least it will come to be like a comfortable amount for you, hopefully. But it's not just what you're being paid in your dollar. It's also what you're being paid in terms of the value that you get from your work.
I would just like to add a couple of things, because every single thing that's been said here, I appreciate, because Belva and I, we were not photojournalists. We didn't have to do that. I mean, when I started, you had a cameraman, a sound man, and me. I mean, it was a 3-person crew, and I have never had to be a video journalist, nor is it anything that I think I would be good at. You, however, this is just kind of what you do or what you've been introduced to, so embrace it. Learn everything that you can. You may not need it right now, but at some point it will be valuable. One of the things that I did learn, though, from the previous years of being in television is I talk about my crew, and the crew to me is family. So if you're not a video journalist and you are working with other people, understand what their job is and what they do and how they do it. Because television, especially, is a collaborative event. And if you don't have an appreciation for what other people's jobs are, how do you know where yours begins and theirs ends, or where you can pick up, or where you can collaborate, who you work with well? I'm still in touch with people that I worked with. My floor director, one of the best floor directors in the country, Joey Smith, still here. And Joey could tell me, the cameras could be here. If Joey pointed and cued me behind me, I would turn around, because I trusted him that much, because he never, ever led me astray. And so know your crew, know the people that you're working with, what they do, and collaboration is the key word. And finally, know the relationships that you're forming right now at this university. I can't tell you how important it is to be able to say, 10 years from now, when I was at USF, there was this great classmate who just always was on it precisely with this, 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 and this. Wonder where she is now, or wonder where he is now. Don't burn bridges, build them to relationships in this business.
Audience, Do we have questions?
If we can have if you're a student or if you're a faculty or staff, if you could tell your name, if you're a student, tell us what year you are.
I'm actually an alum from 3 months ago. My name is Zoe, and I had a question for you ladies about whether you would recommend graduate school.
Well, okay, I'll start it. It's tough because while I very, very much respect education, and I have a graduate degree, I did a one-year master's, if it is graduate school or there's a job there that you can get, I would say take the job and look at companies that may in a couple of years allow you to be part of a program where they pay for your education. And that way you're getting kind of a double bang. But I think it's just critically important if there is access and that you can get into the industry, it's very important. It doesn't diminish a graduate degree, it's just that you may want to combine it in a different way than just going from senior year directly into graduate school.
Really quickly, I just want to let you know, I was at this crossroads when I came back from Japan, and somebody said, I was looking at graduate school, and somebody said, you know what, just as Valerie said, get a job. And so I went and I got the lowest paying production tech job, but then I went out on all of my days off and put together a reporting tape. And so I would say, you know, I mean, at my, you know, like we've all been saying, it's a changing industry. When I go back to Duluth, they are now putting, sometimes interns on air to do stories because it's that kind of, you know, business model now where you're doing more with less. So I would say, you know, if you want to report on air, get a job because as soon as you get in, you are on the ground, you know, and you are running. Whereas if you go to graduate school, it's good for networking. That was one thing I found. I wasn't in a graduate program, so I didn't have that built-in network that you get. But if you can find a place, and sometimes it might mean moving to a smaller city, or it might mean, you know, going to someplace here in the Bay Area and getting, you know, really a low-paying or maybe non-paying job, but just getting in the door and building those relationships and skills, I would recommend that because that I think is a valuable way, and you know you can always learn things on your own, you know, if you need to, but you know really trying to get into the job I think is useful.
Except there's a great experiment going on at UC Berkeley's graduate school. I don't know all of the particulars, but I would highly recommend it because at the core what they're doing is they're trying to figure out what the next model is going to be. So students are getting the experience of study and shaping the future. Don't know a lot about it, but I only know what the leaders of that program said. And if I were in the world out there looking today, I would try to get into that program where people are making the decisions about the future.
I would do what you're doing and ask a lot of people in the industry that you're interested in, because I think the answer depends. For journalism, I totally agree with what Jana and Valerie said. And I love how Valerie said that some companies will pay for your master's, because that master's degree may help you in making a transition. You do journalism for a few years, you decide maybe that's not for you and you want to go to the next thing. That degree will be there and probably would help you if it was an MBA or whatnot. But I think your education and your master's degree doing what we're doing in the trenches is highly valuable, and you can't get that in a classroom. The networking is really important, but you can do that by joining professional organizations like SPJ or AAJA or any number of journalism organizations. Google it and you'll find out where, you know, there are scholarships to be had, fellowships to pay for your, you know, your work, and that's where you can develop a lot of great contacts. And you should, this is the first step in your network right here. Get everybody's information, get on their Twitter, their Facebook, their card, their email, whatever the case may be. Make your connections every chance that you can, because this business ends up getting very, very small.
Absolutely. I have a question. How many of you have business cards?
All right.
Great.
Good. But you know what? Every single student, I tell my students all the time, I teach at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco. I teach the art of the interview. Our first class was yesterday, and when they left, I told them, it's not that I have stock or anything in Vista Print, but vista.print.com, you can get 250 free business cards. Go there right away. There is nothing worse than meeting someone who would like to help you, and then they say, well, how do I get in touch? And the student takes a piece of paper, tears it, and starts writing their name down. Your professionalism starts now. And so if someone says, how can I get in touch with you? Have your business card, your name, the year you graduate, the course of study, and your contact information. Always have it with you. If you jog, if you play golf, if you run out to do something, have it in your wallet. You never know when there's going to be an opportunity. My dad, as Belva knows this story, it's contained in my book because I believe this very much applies to everything in life. My dad always says the rear view mirror whenever I was facing a tough situation. He would say, Valerie, why does a car have a rear view mirror? The answer was, so you know where you come from. He'd say, that's right, but what happens if you look in the rear view mirror too long? The answer was, you won't know what you run into. He wasn't talking about having an accident. He was talking about you won't know what opportunities you run into if you're just looking in the rearview mirror. You're not looking forward. Business card, looking forward.
Oh, one quick thing too, just to add on to that. If you do a card, one thing that I found recently that a lot of people are doing are putting a link to like a website, or even if you have YouTube, if you're in broadcasting, even if you do a student project, pop it on YouTube or put it on Vimeo or put it online, and then you can just have a little line underneath your mobile and your other info, and then that gives somebody a way to see what you do, and that's a really good tool. So that's another thing I would just add to what Valerie said.
Okay, it's 1 o'clock right now, but we're going to try to go for 10 more minutes, so we're going to try to get in a few more questions. Who has a question? Yes. Roland, what you got?
Thank you guys for being here. I just had a quick question. I get this for anyone who wants to answer on the panel. I'm here for a gender course, and I see, obviously, you guys, just a large span of years have been in journalism, but I've never spent time in a newsroom. I've kind of done PR things, more related to an internship with the mayor's office. But if you could speak a little about to the dynamics of men and women. Do you see more women in newsrooms now, or because obviously I'm from Los Angeles, and when I look at the TV now, I feel like most of the TV anchors are women, women with Pat Harvey, a lot of different, But if you could speak to maybe the newsroom and the changing nature, if any.
Yeah.
We have men at KTVU, and they're cool.
There is something there. When the airways were dominated by men, the salaries were better, the working conditions were better, and as the conditions became more volatile and without as many rewards, the men migrated and women moved in because we were the ones willing to take the sacrifice. We were willing to work for less because we were mowing down old barriers. So I think everything rights itself eventually, and hopefully the salaries are going to go up again, and a guy can feel he can support a wife, and many of the women who come in are single and can do other things.
Well, I was just going to, one quick thing. If you're going into the industry and you as a male, your opinion is there are a lot of women, and maybe you're thinking you don't have an opportunity, look everywhere. I mean, television isn't just commercial television anymore. It's multimedia. So you have the opportunity to have your own podcast. You have the opportunity to do many things that we didn't. I wouldn't look at it so much as there are so many women, and so what's the culture in the newsroom? I would look more at what is the culture in management, because it's managers who make the decision as to who's going to be in the newsroom. And unfortunately, often too many female choices are made for reasons that are not the legitimate reasons that we've talked about here. So the culture of that newsroom could impact you, but not for the reason that you think. It could be that it's showing you what management thinks, how they operate. Is this a place for you? Is this a place for opportunity for you? Or is management clearly on one road, and if you're not the right size, color, gender, shape, or whatever, it's better to know that early on and then look somewhere else.
Hey, I'm Saida, I'm a freshman, and I'm wondering, maybe this is off the mark a little, but when you're reporting, are there taboos? Are there things that you can and can't talk about, ways that you can and can't say something, issues that you can and can't discuss? And does this apply more to women? Does this apply more to people of different races? Is it general? Just putting that out there.
That's a huge question.
Yeah.
Is there something in particular, like in a particular instance that you've seen or that you wonder about?
I'm just putting that out there because I hear just like rumors and things in the more like off-color media, the sort of lesser-known sites about, oh, there's things that you can't talk about on CNN, you know, there's things that they can't say, and blah, blah, blah.
I think you're talking about something called broadcast standards, and every medium is going to have a different level, right? What The Onion reports versus what TMZ reports, versus what, you know, a network like an NBC or an ABC or a Fox reports. That's all going to be different, cable versus broadcast. So it really depends on the station for which you work and the medium itself and what your lawyers and what your ethics department and what your news director is going to tell you is acceptable.
Could I maybe like narrow your question a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, just pick off a little piece of it. So one of the things that I think I hear you saying is, are there certain questions or things that it's difficult to ask people about? Would that be something worth asking? Okay, so
Yeah, for sure.
if maybe some of you could address a situation where you had to talk to, we had perhaps like a volatile interview or you had a touchy question you had to ask, how do you approach that?
Well, I'll just give you a little history. The first time I wanted to do a story about breast cancer in women, I was told I could not do it. And I got into a big fight with our company, fought it all the way to the manager in New York, eventually got the story on the air, and but it took pushing. So I think we pushed most of the walls today, but there are still topics like that that sometimes you'll be challenged on.
I just have to share something so funny that landed in my inbox because Velva just said she had breast cancer. It's like we have pink ribbons. It's totally the norm now. Someone just pitched me from a PR company a story about vaginal rejuvenation. I actually did a blog post on it. I need to post it tomorrow. But I mean, that's how far we've come from you had to fight all the way up to New York. And here I'm getting a pitch about, plastic surgery for your vajayjay. I mean, that, and you know what? If I were at Fox still, and this is what I wrote back, I may have been able to pitch that story, and we may have been able to cover it. Or it would have been a topic on the morning show. So times have changed, attitudes have relaxed. I mean, standards are different, so it's very specific to, the story and the outlet that you're working for.
This lady in the blue and white, you with the blue, your hand was up.
Hi, my name's Theodora and I'm a senior, and this is mostly to those who work in radio, because I spent a 10-month internship at Alice, or CBS Radio. They always mentioned like how radio was shrinking and how tiny it was becoming from when they first started. Are you noticing that? Like, is it harder for people to get into radio?
Forgive me because I don't really pay too much attention to the business aspect of it, but I know that this is because the larger corporations are buying up all of the airwaves and the stations. But I mean, when I first started at KCBS, it was in 1994, and that was a few months before I graduated, and I would say at least half of the same staff are still there. So I don't notice it at KCBS. I know that it's a pretty well-established Bay Area institution. I haven't worked at any of the music stations, but I know they've gone to a lot of automated technology, and that has erased jobs. So in that aspect, I would say that it is shrinking. But the staffing levels at KCBS, because we have to have feet on the ground out in the streets, has not changed since 1994. And I don't know if that's an anomaly or not.
Okay, thank you.
We got one more here. Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, I can do two more questions. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Kristen. I'm a junior at the San Francisco State University, and my future would like to become an anchor eventually. My question is, though, I interned recently at a prominent news station here in the Bay Area, and I noticed that anchors and reporters are given the story to report on for the day. What my question to you is, what's the level of autonomy for you to find your own story that you're passionate about, that you have your interest about, for it to be heard on a regular news, primetime news session?
We'll go. We're all reaching for the microphone. You prove yourself, you do your assignments, you take whatever the assignment desk gives you, you do it well. But in the meantime, have your ideas, let them know. It may not happen right away, but if you keep coming back with ideas that are decent and good, someone may start looking. The other thing is know your assignment editor, know your assignment desk. How do they work? CNN in New York, for example, we're doing so many stories that rely on outside sources as well, that sometimes our rundown is just, it's there, it's already set. There's not any room for anything that's additional. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't still say, you know, on today's newscast we did this. I actually have a contact who can do that. Here's a story idea, write it down, give it to the assignment desk. If they don't do anything with it, I don't think you should look at that as a negative. Be consistent, be deliberate. My first rake at KRON, where I was hired to be the researcher for Phil Wilson, who was the investigative reporter, I started researching faster than he could give me stories. I finished everything up, and so it was like, okay, Phil, what's next? And he was like, I'm fine, just go do something. And I would go to the assignment desk. And at the desk, I said, you know, are you going out on a story? If there's no reporter going, may I ride with the crew? I did that so regularly that when the crew was leaving, they would stop by my cubicle and say, Valerie, are you working or are you rolling with us? And I would always say, I'm rolling with you. And one day it was a story that just kind of blew up. It wasn't expected to be as big as it was. They didn't have a reporter on it. It was the crew, and I was rolling with the crew. And here they said, this is going to be the B-section lead. We need this to be 1 minute and 30, and we need you back in the house in 45 minutes to edit. And I was just like, how can I do this? The way I did it was, as a student, I always was there asking, I want to go in with the reporter and watch him or her edit. I wanted to know how they did it. I knew what the language was. I knew what the personalities were like. And remember I told you about crews? The crews were so great. I looked at my crew and I said, they want me to do this. And the crew turned to me and said, no problem. We have your B-roll. What you need to do is go over here and do your stand-up. That's how I did my first one. So, always being curious, always being ready to say, yeah, I can do that, I hope I can, I hope I can, and having people who can say, yes, you can, and here's what you do.
Yes.
I'm an alum, and this is just a point of admiration. And what I admire is your abilities to ask questions, step back, and look so involved when you're getting your answers. I particularly admire when I watch KQED, Belva. She asks a question and then she lets the person answer it, and she does not waver. So I've seen all of you on the air, I believe, or heard you, and that is what I admire about all of you. Just ask a question and then let the person answer it. Thank you.
So, speaking of thanks, we would like to thank Mary Wardell and Adriana Brion from the Office of Diversity Engagement and Community Outreach. They have done extraordinary work in putting this event together. Anne Marie Devine, also from, tell me your office. The Office of Communications. I just think of her as like the person who's like the link between me and the outside world here at USF. Anyway, thank you so much. She helped put this panel together. Roger Salquist, who had the idea. Provost Jennifer Turpin, who is sort of like the engine behind this. Who else? The Department of Media Studies, the journalism minor, Foster Johnson for putting together our video, and most of all, our incredible panel. This has been such a gift to the university. Thank you so much. There's Valerie and Belva's books are for sale over there. They just brought in fresh sandwiches over there. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for making this a great event.